At 2 a.m., when most people were asleep and the world felt quiet and distant, a single dad named Mark Bennett was jolted awake by the sharp ringing of his phone. His first instinct was panic. Late-night calls had never brought good news. He scrambled for the phone with a pounding heart, expecting something terrible. But instead, a trembling young voice whispered, "Dad, can you come get me?" Mark didn't recognize the voice. He didn't have a daughter. But what he heard next made him sit up straight in the dark. "I shouldn't have gone with them. I don't know where I am." That was all it took. A wrong number. A scared girl. And a choice that would change his life. Before we continue, if you enjoy heartfelt, true-to-life stories that remind us of the good still left in the world, please subscribe to TruthLines USA, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps these stories reach more people who might need a message of hope today. Now, let's begin. Mark Bennett was the kind of father who rarely thought of himself as a hero. He worked long hours as a night janitor, raised his 5-year-old son alone, and spent most days just trying to stay afloat. His life had never been glamorous, but he fought for every bit of stability he could offer his little boy. When the phone rang that night, Mark's first thought was of his son sleeping in the next room, his tiny hand always curled around a stuffed dinosaur. Mark didn't want to leave him, especially not in the middle of the night. But the shaking voice on the other end of the line kept echoing in his head. "I don't know where I am." A good father couldn't ignore that. A decent human being couldn't ignore that. So Mark gently lifted his sleeping son, fastened him into his old pickup truck, and drove into the cold darkness with nothing but the sound of tires on asphalt and a prayer that he wouldn't be too late. He called the number back multiple times. No answer. Just a voicemail from someone named Hannah. But as he drove through the city streets, his headlights cut across an empty parking lot behind an old strip mall. And there, huddled beside a dumpster, was a girl no older than 16, hugging her knees and shaking. He pulled over immediately. "Hey," Mark said softly, stepping out with his hands raised. "My name's Mark. You called me earlier. I'm not your dad, but I'm here to help." The girl lifted her face. Mascara streaked her cheeks. She looked exhausted and terrified. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I must have dialed the wrong number." "That's okay," he said. "Let's get you somewhere safe." She hesitated, but his warm voice and gentle presence made her trust him. She climbed into the truck, and Mark wrapped his son's spare blanket around her shoulders. She told him pieces of the story, how she'd gone to a party with older kids, how it spiraled out of control, how she ran when things felt wrong, and how she didn't know where she was. Mark didn't lecture her. He didn't judge. He just listened and nodded as the sun slowly crept into the sky. Only one thing mattered, getting her home safe. When they reached her house in an upscale neighborhood, the sky was growing pink with morning light. A frantic woman, her mother, ran out before the truck even stopped. She saw her daughter in the passenger seat and burst into sobs. They hugged, clung, cried. Mark stepped back, giving them space. He was relieved. Tired. Ready to go home. But before he could get into his truck, the front door opened again. This time, a tall man in a business suit stepped out. His face was pale with worry, and it took only a glance to see he hadn't slept either. He approached Mark with a shake in his step. "You're the man who brought my daughter home?" he asked. Mark nodded. "Just glad she's okay." The man extended his hand. "I'm Alan Foster." Mark accepted the handshake. Mark Bennett. But the second their hands touched, something in the man's expression shifted. Recognition. Confusion. Surprise. "Mark Bennett," he repeated. "You work for my company." Mark blinked in shock. He did. Then it clicked. Alan Foster, CEO of the massive tech corporation whose name was printed on his janitor ID badge. Mark had never seen him in person. Never imagined he would. "Sir," Mark said awkwardly. "I didn't know." "You were working overtime until 1 a.m., the CEO said, staring at him. "And then you still came out here? After a wrong number call?" Mark shrugged, embarrassed. "She sounded scared." The CEO looked like he didn't know what to say. He kept glancing toward his daughter, then back to Mark, as if trying to process the enormity of what had just happened. Finally, he said, "Please, come inside. I insist." Mark tried to decline. His son was half asleep in the truck, and all he wanted was to get home, feed him breakfast, and maybe catch an hour of rest. But the CEO's wife appeared beside him and said, "You saved our daughter. Please. Let us thank you properly." So Mark relented. He carried his son inside, feeling strangely out of place among polished marble floors and modern furniture. Meanwhile, Hannah hugged him one more time, whispering, "Thank you for answering." While Mark sat at the kitchen table sipping coffee, the CEO stepped aside to speak quietly with his wife. They kept glancing at him, concerned, grateful, thoughtful. Then Alan returned, cleared his throat, and said, "Mark, can I ask you something? Why did you come? Why risk driving into the night for a stranger?" Mark looked at his sleeping son, curled against him with his cheek on Mark's shoulder. He swallowed hard. "Because," he said, "I'd hope someone would do the same for my boy one day." Those words landed like a stone in the quiet kitchen. The CEO nodded slowly, deeply moved. After breakfast and heartfelt goodbyes, Mark stood to leave. But the CEO stopped him at the door. "I can't let you go," he said. Mark froze. "Sir." The CEO stepped closer, his voice firm. I can't let you leave without giving something back. Your kindness, your courage, it matters. And people like you deserve to be lifted up, not burned out working night shifts to survive." Mark tried to protest. "Please, I didn't do this for a reward." "I know," the CEO said. "That's exactly why you deserve one." He handed Mark an envelope. Mark opened it slowly. Inside was a letter offering him a new job, full-time facility supervisor, weekday daytime shifts, triple the salary he currently made, and full benefits for him and his son. Mark felt the room tilt. I don't understand." "You showed up for my child when I wasn't there," the CEO said. "The least I can do is show up for yours." Mark's throat tightened. He stared at the job offer, the promise of stability he'd been fighting for ever since his son was born. His eyes filled with tears he tried to hide, but the CEO gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let me do this," he said softly. "Because you reminded me what it means to care for someone you don't owe anything to." Mark looked at his sleeping son again. He thought of the years of struggle. The exhausted nights. The paychecks that never stretched far enough. And he thought of the girl he'd found trembling in the dark. All he had wanted was to help. He never expected anything in return. But sometimes, kindness circles back in ways too big to imagine. He accepted the offer. As he drove home that morning, sunlight warming the world around him, Mark felt something he hadn't felt in years, hope. His son woke in the back seat, rubbing his eyes, and Mark told him gently, "Daddy got a new job today." The little boy smiled sleepily and said, "I knew today would be a good day." Mark laughed, tears slipping down his cheeks. "Yeah, buddy, it really is. Kindness is rarely convenient. It often shows up at 2 a.m., disguised as a wrong number or a stranger's trembling voice. But when we choose to answer, when we choose compassion over comfort, we create ripples we may never fully see." Mark didn't set out to change a life. He simply refused to turn away from someone in need. And because of that, both his life and theirs were transformed. Maybe kindness isn't about grand gestures. Maybe it's simply about showing up, even when the world is dark and cold, trusting that the light you give will find its way back to you. If this story touched your heart, remember, there's someone out there tonight who might need your kindness, too. And you never know, showing up for them might just change everything. Be good to each other. And thank you for watching TruthLines USA.